Get this. I found a beautiful story from the Curiosity Creator page. Okay, let's read. He proposed 4 times over 30 years. She said no every time, yet she inspired his greatest poetry and a Nobel Prize. Dublin, 1889. William Butler Yeats, a 23-year-old aspiring poet, attended a gathering where he met a woman who would haunt his imagination for the rest of his life. Maud Gonne was was twen- was 22, startlingly beautiful, and unlike anyone Yeats had ever encountered. She was passionate about Irish independence, politically active, intellectually formidable, and possessed a charisma that made rooms fall silent when she spoke. Yeats was immediately, utterly, devastatingly captivated. Within days he knew, within weeks he was writing poetry, within months he proposed marriage. She said no. She would say no 3 more times over the next 14 years, but she would inspire some of the greatest poetry in the English language. Yeats came from an artistic family. His father was a painter and spent his childhood between Dublin and County Sligo in the west of Ireland. Sligo's rugged landscapes, ancient ruins, and folklore-saturated culture seeped into his consciousness, shaping his poetic sensibility. By the time he met Maud, he was already committed to poetry and to the Irish literary revival movement to reclaim and celebrate Irish culture through literature, pushing back against centuries of English cultural dominance. But Maud Gonne gave his poetry new dimension, new intensity, new pain. She was everything Yeats idolized, beautiful, politically committed. What's wrong with you? Kenapa kamu? Beautiful, politically committed, passionate about Ireland's freedom. She embodied the Ireland he wanted to celebrate in verse, fierce, independent, unattainable. The last quality would prove probably Maud admired Yeats. Eh, Maud admired Yeats. She valued his intelligence, his poetry, his dedication to Irish culture. They worked together on various nationalist causes. They corresponded regularly. She inspired him, encouraged him, collaborated with him, but she didn't love him, not the way he loved her. Over the next decade, Yeats proposed repeatedly. Each time Maud declined. She had political work to do. She couldn't be tied down. Marriage would interfere with her activism. She valued their friendship too much to risk it, all of which might have been true, but the deeper truth was simpler. She didn't feel for him what he felt for her. Then, in 1903, Morgan married John McBride, an Irish revolutionary who fought against the British in the Boer War. Yeats was devastated. The woman who'd refused him for over a decade, who'd said she couldn't marry because of her political work, had married a fellow revolutionary instead. The message was clear. It wasn't that Maud couldn't marry, it was that she wouldn't marry him. Many men would have walked away at that point, would have moved on, found someone else, nursed their wounds in private, and let the relationship fade. Yeats did something different. He transformed his pain into art. Some of his most powerful poems emerged from his unrequited love for Maud Gonne. When You Are Old, 1893, a haunting meditation on aging and lost love, imagining Maud as an old woman looking back and regretting not choosing him. But man, but one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrows of your changing face. Nausicaa Troy, 1910. Comparing Maud to Helen of Troy, questioning why she had to be born in the wrong time. Why? What? What could she have done being what she is? Was there another try for her to pour? They weren't just love poems, they were explorations of beauty, violence, politics, history, all filtered through his feelings for one woman who wouldn't love him back. Heartbreak became his muse, but Yeats refused to let unrequited love define his entire existence. While Maud remained his emotional obsession, he continued building his literary and cultural legacy. He became a central figure in the Irish literary revival, working alongside other writers to create a distinctly Irish literary tradition. In 1904, he co-founded the Abbey Theatre in Dublin, which became the National Theatre of Ireland and launched the careers of numerous Irish playwrights. He wrote plays, essays, manifestos. He developed complex theories about history, mysticism, and art. He became one of the most important literary figures of the early 20th century, and in 1923 he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, the first Irish person ever to receive the honor. The Nobel Committee decided his inspired poetry, which in a highly artistic form gives expression to the spirit of a whole nation, the spirit of Ireland. The Ireland Montgun had embodied for him decades earlier. Even winning literature's highest honor couldn't erase his feelings for Maud. They remained friends, complicated, intense, emotionally fraught friends, even after her marriage to McBride ended badly. He was abusive. They separated. Even after McBride was executed for his role in the 1916 Esther Rising, Maud still wouldn't marry Yeats. He proposed again. She refused again. At that point, Yeats was in his 50s, one of the most celebrated poets in the world, and still being rejected by the woman who inspired so much of his work. Finally, in 1917, at age 52, Yeats married Georgie Hadleys, a woman 27 years his junior who admired his work and shared his interest in mysticism and the occult. Many viewed it as a practical arrangement. Fans also thought marrying a younger admirer, but something unexpected happened. The marriage worked. Georgie wasn't intimidated by Yeats' fame or his lingering obsession with Maud Gonne. She was intelligent, patient, and brought her own interest to the relationship. 4 days after their marriage, she began practicing automatic writing, a spiritualist technique where writer allows unconscious thoughts to flow onto paper. Yeats was passionate. Together, they conducted years of automatic writing sessions that influenced his later poetry and his book, A Vision, a complex mystical system of historical cycles and personality types. Georgie gave Yeats something more never could have: partnerships, stability, creative collaboration, and surprisingly genuine happiness. They had two children. They traveled. They worked on his poetry together. The marriage that seemed like a consolation prize became one of the most important relationships of his life. But he never completely stopped writing about Maud. Even his final years, poems referencing their complicated relationship appeared. She remained his eternal muse, his impossible love, his poetic inspiration. Yeats died in France in 1939, aged 73, one of the 20th century's most influential poets. His body was initially buried in France, but in 1948 his remains were brought back to Ireland and reinterred in Drumcliff churchyard. Conscious Lego, the landscape that had shaped his childhood imagination. His epitaph, chosen by Yeats himself, reads, "Cast a cold eye on life, on death, whose man passed by." Characteristically dramatic, mysterious, deviant, Montcalm outlived him by 14 years, dying in 1953 at age 86. She never remarried after McBride's execution. She continued her political activism until her death. Should she regret not marrying yet? She never said so publicly. She maintained they had been better as friends and collaborators than they would have been as husband and wife. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps the tension of unrequited love created better poetry than fulfilled love would have produced. Or perhaps that's just what we tell ourselves to make sense of tragedy. What's certain is this: yet greatest poetry emerged from wanting something he couldn't have, from loving someone who couldn't love him back the same way, from transforming personal pain into universal art. His life teaches uncomfortable lessons about creativity and suffering. Would we have his magnificent poetry if Morgan had said yes? Would his work have the same intensity, the same longing, the same transcendent quality if he'd been happily married to her from age 23? We can't know. But we do know that some of literature's most powerful expressions of love, loss, and longing came from a man whose heart broke repeatedly for 30 years, and we know that he eventually found happiness anyway. Not with the woman he had always wanted, but with someone who wanted him back, who collaborated with him, who gave him peace. That's not the romantic ending the story seemed to promise, but perhaps it's a better one. The impossible love inspired the poetry. The possible love provided the life. Remember his name, William Butler Yeats. Remember that he proposed for times over 30 years to a woman who inspired his greatest work but never loved him back. Remember that he won the Nobel Prize, co-founded the National Theatre, and helped define Irish cultural identity, all while carrying unrequited love like a wound that never quite healed. Remember that he eventually married someone else and found happiness, proving that consolation prizes sometimes turn out to be the real gift. Remember that creativity often emerges from suffering, but suffering alone isn't enough. You have to transform it into something beautiful. And remember that loving someone who doesn't love you back isn't romantic, it's painful. But if you're a poet, it might become something lasting when you are old and gray and full of sleep and nodding by the fire. Take down this book and slowly read and dream of the thought that your eyes had once and of the shadows deep. Those lines will outlive everyone who inspired them, rejected them, and read them. That's not consolation, that's immortality. Uh, yes, Hanson. Bless me